Rules, 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 or as the Old Testament would call them, laws. The Old Testament has a lot of laws. Laws about what you can eat, laws about what you can't eat, laws about where you can go and how to do this and how to do that and how not to do that. Tons and tons of laws, tons and tons of rules. So what happens as a Christian if we break those rules? Because those rules are God's rules. They are, they were, and they always will be God's rules. What happens though as a Christian? What happens if we break God's laws? See, the New Testament tells us that we're saved by grace through faith, not of works, not of following rules, not of doing good things. That's not what saves us, the New Testament says. But we're saved by grace through faith, that it's a free gift from God. So what does happen when we break God's laws? Here's the deal. God's laws are very similar for a Christian as your parents' rules are for you. Very, very similar. In fact, God intends that your parents be an example of who God is and live their lives like God so that you can see how God wants to interact with you. Your parents put rules in place. If you break them, what happens to you? Well, of course, you might get a punishment, but do you stop being their child? No, of course not. You don't stop being their child, and when you break God's laws, you don't stop being His child because you were saved by grace. God saved you, and it's not from anything you can, did, or even would do. You can't save yourself. Only God can save you. So what does happen when we break His rules? There are consequences to breaking God's rules. But the New Testament in Galatians chapter 5, verse 1 tells us this, that we ought not allow ourselves to become slaves to the law. See, Galatians, Paul tells us that we were slaves to the law once. We had to follow every tiny piece no matter what, because we had to be afraid that if we didn't, then God would not save us. You know what? You've been set free from that. You've been set free from the law. You don't have to worry that you won't go to heaven if you break God's laws. So then, should we bother to follow God's laws? Now here's where it's really, really interesting. You ever have a substitute teacher at school? Here's the thing with a substitute teacher. Your classroom has all these rules, right? All kinds of rules. These rules are meant to keep a nice orderly classroom, to help you to learn, to help you to be the best student that you can be. You have a substitute teacher come in, and they don't really know the rules as well as the teacher does, and they don't even know them as well as the students do. And so often with a substitute teacher, things get a little more chaotic, a little less of a good learning environment, because students break the rules under a substitute teacher because they know they can get away with it. Here's the difference as a Christian. As a Christian, we don't have to follow the law for our salvation. But as Christians, as we grow to be more and more like Christ, we learn to love to follow God's law, to follow His rules. We do what's right not because we have to, but because we want to. In that substitute analogy, it would be like the substitute coming in and you saying, but I still want a good environment. I still want to learn. I still want order, and so I'm going to follow the rules. You aren't compelled, meaning you don't have to follow God's laws to get to heaven, because then that would be of your own doing that you get to heaven. No, we follow God's laws, we follow God's rules because Jesus says, if you love me, you would keep my commands. Not because there's some big penalty, not because you'll stop being my friends and my children, but because you love me. So God's law applies to us because we love Him, because we choose to follow His law. By the way, that's the best kind of following laws that there is. People who follow them not because there's a penalty, because if it's only a penalty keeping you following a law, the minute that penalty is away or you think you might not get caught, you don't follow it anymore. Love is the best reason to follow a law. It's the only reason that you'll ever follow it for your whole life in all circumstances. Righteousness, doing the right thing, is what we're called to as Christians. Not just following a law just to follow it, just to earn something, but to seek every day to do the right thing because we love God. You've been called to righteousness. When we're saved, Jesus tells us that we've become a new creation, like a new tree. All the old things go away. Behold, all things have become new. And so as new creations, we can start to produce new fruit, new wonderful things in our lives. We don't get bound by the law. Paul says in Galatians 5:1, you used to be a slave to the law. Don't enslave yourselves again, saying, I got to do this, I got to do that. Instead, be free and say, I choose to follow Christ. Don't forget to look up Buck Denver this week in your email and watch those videos. All right? Love you very much. Have a wonderful week.